Okay, so in my last video, I showed about modules. So let's go ahead and just dive into one of those. So in this case, we're going to actually jump in. Here's application. Again, very empty. I try to put all my configs as files into the application config. Makes it real easy to find them. So even the ones that the Project Orangebox framework uses, those are in here as well, like application, the authorization, and things like that. That way, you don't have to dig into the modules to actually change those. And any of the ones that the modules do need to add, those would actually be inserted via settings. So you really don't need to touch files after you install this framework. You can do all your settings right in the framework itself. So let's just take a quick look then here at the Project Orangebox module. Like I said, it's kind of a CodeIgniter package. I've done a little bit of work to the router so that way it can support multiple folders. And that way, just by dropping this module in, anybody can access these. Another thing that I've done is that I've added a controller, made it so that you have to add controller to the end of all of the controllers. That way we don't run into problems with the class naming. And then even inside of those, we'll open up one real quick here, access controller. Even inside of those, I made it so that all of the methods that get called have the word action on the end there. So index action, delete action, details action, and that way you don't run into some of the other um, function names that are built into PHP. Another really nice thing here is, let's see if we can get one that has it. I actually use REST for all of my interactions, even with the forms or even really with the web pages. So here's our new, for instance. So this is what would be, this is the controller a method that would be run when we go to do a new action to actually display that on the page. And this is actually what gets posted from the form. So I actually separate these. I don't have to do the if post is set, then do the post stuff. So it kind of makes it a little bit more restful to say new post action and then actually do the post based on this other controller method. I actually do some validation based on that as well. So anytime you fill out a form, you're not actually sending it all the way through the controller, letting the controller do something and then saying, oh, hey, this is wrong, and then try to repopulate. If something's wrong, it actually never posted the information via a standard post to the server. It actually posted via AJAX or via a REST call to the module in this case here. So the user model said, hey, is that valid? We're trying to do an update. Here's the data that they gave me. And is that valid? And if it's not valid, let me send those errors back out to the front end to pop that little dialogue that you saw in some of the other videos. So again, this is very RESTful as well. So here's the get. This is the get. So we can say, okay, they want to edit a record. So that would be your get. Here would be the validation. So it is a post, but we append this little additional method onto what you're posting, validate post action. And then once this is valid, so if this returns that yes, it is 100% valid, it will actually post the form, which once again it validates to make sure that it's valid. Now, of course, we validated it sort of here. So if we get here and something blows up, you can just throw up an error or something because at that point, someone's probably messing around with your forms or something like that. So that kind of gives you a little idea of what we did with some of the controllers there. Here are some of the features that I've extended in the Orange framework. So the database model contains actually some stuff for actually interacting with a actual SQL database. Controller, a little bit extension on the controller, some stuff that I've added to input, of course, some stuff that I needed to add to the loader, so some different things would happen. It would know where to look for certain packages. The model, which database model extends, actually contains all of the validation, which I like to attach directly to the model. The model should know what the data looks like. The model should tell you if the data you're trying to give it is no good. I don't like to put that stuff in the controller because then the controller and the model have to have knowledge of what the piece of data that you're accessing needs to look like or what kind of problems there might be there. Output, some different stuff I've added there for instance, sending out JSON and whatnot. Again, the router extension that I wrote so that way it can look into multiple folders for the different controllers. Here are the uh, controllers that the app controller extends. So there's the one for the admin, anything for any kind of Ajax. Both of those, both admin and public, extend GUI. So any kind of GUI that would need to be sent out, HTML, so on and so forth. This is the public controller that gets called for anything where you're not logged in. And then finally, the orange framework, which just adds some additional functions, global functions to CodeIgniter, so that way you can do some things real easy instead of having to deep dive into it, maybe a class or something like that. I have extended some of the helpers, nothing really awesome there. They're just some things that I thought maybe the helpers needed. There's actually an install file. This is actually the libraries. So I've added a few libraries. What auth does is control the authorization. Events is a trigger-based event system, much better than the CodeIgniter hooks, in my opinion. Module, of course, manages all of the modules. I've extended the email one. And again, you can use it or not use it. But what that does actually, I composer in PHP Mailer, a great open source package. And what this is a wrapper around the CodeIgniter email um, library that allows you to make the same calls, but those then get routed into PHP Mailer. Nothing wrong with the CodeIgniter one, but just as standards and stuff change, I found it once in a while has problems with connecting to various servers. PHP Mailer handles it really well, and I wouldn't expect the CodeIgniter team to support every single email server out there. There are many packages and many other teams that can do that much better. The image library one, again, just extending a few things that I think need to probably be on image library that weren't. This O1 is actually some different things that I use all over the system as a static library. So that way, if you need to display escaped HTML onto the page or escaped, a variable or something like that, just functions that you would normally use in a view. Page actually creates kind of a templating type system, or maybe not necessarily templating, but allows you to manage the assets that you need to add to the page. What themes load plugins and things like that. Unzip needed to add that in there because in order to unzip the modules as they are added to the system. Validation rules I actually add as traits. These actually pretty much mirror the CodeIgniter ones. I've added a bunch more. I've kind of separated the CodeIgniter validation library into its own. Nothing wrong with that one. This actually mirrors that pretty well, but I just kind of moved it completely to its own entity. And then finally, while it kind of controls anything that you would attach to a session, such as flash messages that you see pop up, maybe if you want to save history or breadcrumbs or something like that. These are just the standard models that come with it. Those just directly relate to each of the tables here. And then these are all the views. Here's your default view for the actual back end, and then any of the other views that need to be loaded in there. All included with the system. Here's that tooltips module. So there's that. We installed a little while ago. Jump into themes. So with themes, what those actually do is, again, this is in the public folder, so these are publicly accessible. So therefore, to get to the CSS or JavaScript or whatever, that Apache needs to have those in a public location so your browser can download it. So that's where everything inside this theme folder is publicly accessible. Some CSS, maybe some images, some JavaScript for various areas, any kind of helper that you might need. I was using the Gravatar up there in the top right corner for a little while. Just kind of left that in there. These are to create the Bootstrap menu that you see at the top. Bootstrap 3 is what I'm using. Now, this is actually another giant static library that is specific to the theme or specific to Bootstrap. So if for some reason you wanted to recreate the entire backend and include it as a different theme, because really this is just a theme that happens to be called Orange, you could do that with just by switching out, still calling the library theme, but switching out the functions for your own, or at changing the ones that are in here. Here's actually some kind of like a startup script that when the theme gets loaded, hey, I need to also load these 4 or 5 other things. And I actually kind of brought back old school CodeIgniter plugins, not what they were before, but the word's kind of the same. And what these are is these are plugins that the theme can say, hey, I need to attach this to the view, so that way they can, maybe have a bootstrap. What you see is what you get, or here's that color picker I showed, or that combo box. So these actually get loaded up, and then they can attach this to the page, and this JavaScript that's needed. Or here's the date time picker that gets loaded up, and it brings in the date time picker from a CDN or wherever. Same type of thing for a lot of these other ones. Fixi's the top header bar. So load this plugin. The plugin then maybe loads this and sets a few other settings somewhere. So that's kind of how those work. So that gives you a little bit of an overview of the system. Um, Probably have a few more videos coming after this.